My name is Rowan Ellis. I am 34, and for 13 years I have lived a life without family dinners, group chats, or surprise knocks on the door. Quiet has always felt safer than chaos. Work is easier to understand than people. Most nights I'm on the east side of Denver, running a late-night dessert business out of an industrial kitchen. Cakes, bars, pastries, anything sweet enough to keep the lights on and my mind steady. Last month, that business finally blew open. Orders spiked, contracts landed, and the numbers on my screen started saying something I had never dared to think out loud. I could leave my cramped apartment. So I did. I bought a house bigger than anything I grew up in, bigger than anything I ever thought I'd need, a place with a kitchen that felt like a promise, and spare rooms I hadn't decided how to use yet. I moved in with a folding chair, a box of leftover cupcakes, and the lightness of realizing I had crossed an invisible line between the girl I'd been trained to be and the woman I'd built on my own. That first night, the house was still in a way that didn't feel threatening. The next morning, the past showed up on my doorstep. Literally. I hadn't seen them in 13 years, but there they were outside my new front door, as if the gap between us were a long weekend instead of a third of my life. My younger sister, Lila Ellis, and my mother, Caroline, flanked by luggage and expectations, stared at my house in open assessment. They carried themselves with the kind of confidence people have when they believe they still own a piece of you. What happened when I opened the door is the reason I'm telling this story, but to understand that moment, you have to know how our roles hardened long before any of us named them. In our family, patterns settled quietly. By the time I understood the weight of being the oldest, it was already on my shoulders. Responsibility came to me the way music lessons come to other kids, through repetition. I picked up extra shifts at a diner the minute I could drive, brought home thin paychecks, and plugged whatever holes appeared in the budget. No one asked me to. It was simply clear who was supposed to handle things. Lila grew up under a different sky, where I was the fix, she was the feeling. She had a softness adults mistook for fragility. A scraped knee earned her concern. A missed assignment earned her reasons. A bad decision earned her comfort. Our mother's worry settled over Lila like a blanket. If Lila was tired, we lowered our voices. If Lila was stressed, plans shifted. If Lila cried, the house reorganized itself around the sound. I didn't resent her, not then. I just adapted, moving into the background so quietly that being in the background became its own kind of home. Looking back, I can see where the ground started tilting, but at the time it just felt like living. The shift began quietly. Little things. A missing wallet meant my mother's eyes went to me first. A forgotten appointment became my fault for not reminding anyone. Anytime I tried to clarify what actually happened, Caroline's expression tightened like I was making trouble instead of trying to tell the truth. The moment everything snapped into focus came one humid summer afternoon. Lila had been saving a small amount of cash for a school trip, barely enough for gas station snacks, but it mattered to her. One day, she couldn't find it. Instead of checking her bag or her pockets, she walked straight to our mother, eyes wet, hands turned upward like the universe was personally picking on her. "I don't know what happened," she whispered, voice shaking. I told them I hadn't touched the money. No one yelled, no one accused me outright. But the disappointment in Caroline's face said more than words. It was the disappointment reserved for someone who had failed a test they should have passed easily. I realized then that in our house, feelings weighed more than facts. Lila's fear, her tears, her trembling hands carried more credibility than anything I said. After that, the pattern hardened. If Lila had a late project, it was because I didn't help. If she missed the bus, it was because I took too long in the bathroom. If she was anxious, I wouldn't be supportive enough. No one carved these rules into stone, but unspoken things can be heavier than anything written. So I retreated into the one place where effort and outcome had a clear relationship: work. I brewed coffee at dawn in a corner cafe, wiped down office desks in the evenings, and took any shift that kept me away from the vague, unanswerable accusations waiting at home. Eventually, I moved into a small studio across town. I thought space might help us reset. Instead, the distance just gave everyone more room to solidify their version of me. The breaking point came with my old sedan. Lila asked to borrow it for a quick errand before school. She'd driven it before, and I said yes without hesitation. When she returned, the front bumper was dented inward, a long scrape carved down the paint. She came into the house shaking, clutching her coat like she was the injured one. By the time I walked into the kitchen, the story had already taken shape. I'd given her an unreliable car. I hadn't explained something. I'd put her at risk. No one said the words, "your fault," but they didn't have to. The conclusion floated in the air, already agreed upon. Standing there, I understood something I couldn't unknow. In my family's narrative, truth was optional. The pattern was not an accident, it was a system, and I was its designated problem. After that, I stopped trying to fix it. Holidays happened without me. Group photos were taken in houses I no longer entered. I became the sister who pulled away, the daughter who forgot where she came from. 13 years is a long time to live outside that orbit. In those years, I pieced together a life out of graveyard shifts and rented kitchens. I took the cheap late-night slot in a shared space on Denver's east side. At first, it was nothing more than small orders, a few boxes of cookies for coworkers, then their friends' offices. Batter, sugar, and heat became my language. Progress was measurable. How many trays came out of the oven before dawn? How often I needed to restock flour? Whether I could pay rent without checking my account 3 times. Lila, meanwhile, built an online mythology. From what I heard, she posted cryptic lines about betrayal and healing, about being left behind, about carrying her family alone. My name was never mentioned, but it didn't need to be. Relatives commented with heart emojis and prayers, resharing her grief like it was gospel. They needed a villain, and I was convenient. I didn't argue, I didn't correct. You can't negotiate with a story people prefer. So I kept my head down and kept baking. The turning point came when a local office manager, Kendra Moss, a regular at the cafe where I still worked mornings, asked if I could handle desserts for a corporate event. It wasn't a massive order, but it was bigger than anything I'd done. I said yes. That one yes changed my entire trajectory. The corporate order Kendra placed nearly flattened me. I baked through the night, sure I'd taken on more than I could handle. Then she emailed to say they loved everything and wanted another round. Word spread quietly. Offices and co-working spaces added my desserts to their routines. Orders grew, until the shared kitchen felt cramped, so I rented a narrow industrial space between an auto shop and a warehouse and bought bigger equipment. When a regional cafe chain asked for weekly deliveries to several locations, the invoices finally showed something solid: stability. I cut expenses, saved aggressively, and watched numbers I'd never seen beside my name. Eventually, a realtor dropped keys into my hand and said, "Congratulations, homeowner." The house wasn't glamorous, but it had long counters, open rooms, and doors that locked from the inside. It felt like proof. I hadn't finished unpacking when tires crunched over the gravel one morning. Lila and Caroline stepped out of a car with suitcases and the easy entitlement of people arriving where they believe they belong. I watched them on the security camera until my pulse settled, then picked up the folder already waiting by the door. A guest license with clear limits, a notarized no trespass notice, and a list of unpaid temporary helps no one had ever named as debt. I opened the door halfway and left it there. Lila shifted toward the opening like walking in was a given. Caroline stood just behind her, expecting familiarity to do the rest. For a moment they waited for the version of me who would move aside and absorb the cost. She didn't. I kept my hand on the door and the folder where they could see it. I told them they were not moving in, that any future contact would be in writing, and that coming to my home uninvited again would mean I used the papers I was holding. No raised voice, no defense of the past, just conditions. Silence stretched long enough for recognition to land. Then they turned away, stiff and offended, already drafting their version. Within hours, screenshots of Lila's posts about a cold sister and a slammed door landed on my phone, followed by long messages from relatives about family. I replied once, to all of them. From now on, email only. No conversations about money or housing. Abusive messages would be ignored. Then I followed my own rules and stopped replying. Nothing in my daily life collapsed. Orders still went out, staff still clocked in, ovens still needed preheating. My days no longer bent around someone else's crisis. 3 months later, Lila emailed again, this time only to ask if I knew anywhere hiring flexible shifts. I sent a short list and went back to work. Weeks later, she sent a photo of herself in a plain uniform with a name badge. I saved it and let it be. Around 6 months, Caroline asked if she could see the house once. Just her, one visit. I agreed, with a specific day and time. She walked through quietly, noticing the labeled shelves, the lined baking trays, the extra chairs waiting for people who chose to be there. We sat at the kitchen table like two adults with separate lives. When she left, her hand rested on the doorframe for a moment, a small acknowledgement that whatever authority she once assumed stopped there. Time moved. I heard secondhand that Lila was promoted and that her posts were now more about long shifts than betrayal. Whether her private story about me softened or hardened, I chose not to know. Her narrative was never mine to manage. Meanwhile, the house filled. Staff stayed after for end-of-week potlucks. Neighbors brought casseroles instead of emergencies. Friends played cards at my table and ate whatever had survived the day's orders. The rooms that had echoed with absence started holding easy conversation and laughter that didn't require me to disappear first. The folder still sits by the door. It doesn't make me cruel, it makes my boundaries visible. I don't rehearse arguments in my head anymore. Some people will always cling to a version of you that keeps them comfortable. Let them. Your peace can't depend on their willingness to revise. If any of this feels familiar, hold on to this. You're allowed to close doors that only open to drain you. You're allowed to protect the life you built, even from people who share your last name. That isn't selfish. It's the start of a life that finally makes sense.